think that looks good. Can you see something? Yeah, okay. That is the first part, and we just need to check if that is working as well. And yes, it does. So hi everybody. Thanks for the warm words, thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me here today, which is in fact a pleasure considering that it has been a while that we've spoken last. As a matter of fact, I looked it up and it was end of 21 in like the blurry Corona times that we had worked with. And also then the funny thing is that I'm also very excited about is that because I see you in real life for the first time today. And we had worked together 3.5 years ago. So, and I think that is always good to one day meet these people in person because there's nothing more valuable for great collaboration. So, very glad I'm here today and I can do this with you. Maybe just some words because I feel like every other company on that stage is quite familiar to you. In fact, you've probably used one or even more products of them. Maybe not so much of us, but I started DAYONE in Berlin in 2012. Managing partner of DAYONE, and DAYONE is a strategic consultancy and design studio. That means we are a team of 40 experts, digital strategists, UX, UI designers, product managers, and change managers. And I think the thing that we ultimately try to do and create in the spaces that we work is bringing together customer value with business values and ways of working that the teams that are actually executing this are doing it with motivation and with joy and ideally fun every day, because we truly believe that the question how much you love your job and how much you love the stuff that you do had a significant impact on the results that you're actually creating. So this is what we're doing. Now you would ask why startup? Maybe like a little bit because of course we're working for large corporations in the automotive and telecommunication industries. Like I brought one case study today, working in health and fintech, but ultimately also have worked for a couple of startups, and I have started a startup myself earlier last year, which is in the electronic music industry. We're right now in the beta launch phase with 250 users, and we're going to launch it publicly later this year in August. So if you watch out for FamFam or start following us on Instagram, you might be able to have a look at it and explore it from later on. So I guess overall I would consider myself some sort of like an entrepreneur in the digital space. And as David mentioned, I've designed trainings and I've delivered them for the Google Digital Academy, for OMR, and also for the XU group. And yeah, you spoiled it as well, because now there would have been my introduction, what is my connection to SCHOTT and whatnot, but I think you've heard it all. So I've met this guy first at the Google Digital Academy, then we have worked together. And this is what brings us here. As you can see, there's a lot of different things that come into people's minds when we talk about efficiency. And the thing that I would like to talk to you today is the efficiency trap, and why doing things right can lead you wrong. Which might sound contradictory at the beginning, because what is he talking about? Like, if we're doing things right, how can it be wrong, right? Well, there's an old saying and an old story about the real problem with efficiency, and I'm sure you've heard it all, that the most efficient horse-drawn carriage company, they did not invent the car. And as much as this is history, I think it's not just a theory, it's been proven time and time again. And I'm sure we could actually add more logos to this wall, and maybe also for you to think about it, is if SCHOTT would have just focused all the energy that this company has on perfecting the glass, would you even exist today? Or would you exist in the way that you're even existing today if you're just doing that, right? So I think the real problem with efficiency is that, and this is what I would like to show to you today, is that if it's misapplied, efficiency can kill innovation. And it can kill the future and basically like the existence of companies. So the question really is, and I'm not saying efficiency is wrong, but then I guess the question really is like, how can you reframe it into something that is actually building value for you as a company? First of all, clarity over buzzwords. Speaking about the bullshit bingo, here we are again. I have 3 words that I will refer to today in my talk. So for one, it's efficiency, which is what we've already seen, and I think it's also standing here exactly, doing things right. While there's productivity that we've also seen in the work cloud, that is achieving more with less effort, working smart, not hard. And last but not least, innovation is, of course, doing the right things and maybe even differently than anybody else has done them. So those are 3 important words that will run through my presentation. So, and I hope they're easy enough for you to remember. Otherwise, raise your hand and ask me again the question so we can reframe it. But those are the 3 words that I would like to put into context today. And I think one of the main messages for you of this keynote today is that when teams confuse efficiency for progress, they're polishing the past instead of inventing the future. There's some proof to it and some studies. If you don't believe DAYONE, maybe you believe McKinsey, or maybe you believe BCG, who are investing quite some money actually in like doing these studies and bringing the research. But the McKinsey report that I would like to refer to is that they found out that 80% of automation budgets, and I think in a time where we're shifting to AI, into Gen AI, there's a lot of budget going into automation of processes and workflows, is that 80% of the automation budgets, they improve execution speed, but only 20% impact innovation. So there's a lot about optimizing in the here and there, but it sort of like turns away from the perspective and the question like, but what's gonna happen tomorrow? Which at the same time is one of the biggest questions that we're asking in AI context right now. If you have heard previously in a talk said like, I'm supposed to present about AI in October, what do I know today, what's gonna happen until October, right? And then the second study from BCG found out that like companies that are focusing only on cost efficiency, because we've also seen the word of cost more than one time in the word cloud that you guys just created together, is that they see a 30% lower long-term growth rate. And this is kind of like the same thing. If you're focusing too much on the right now and how to do it better, you will most likely forget about the future. So, the efficiency trap, what do I mean by it? And the question is like, how does efficiency actually kill innovation? I could speak about leadership now and all of these different things, right, that we're discussing these days. And I think there's some quite increasing demand and people call for better leadership and more leadership skills and all of these things. But it's actually very easy that it starts with your brain. So I'm not a neurologist, so please don't ask me any detailed questions about our brains and how they work, but I think what I can explain to you on the surface, which makes, at least to me, a lot of sense in this regards, is that we have 2 brain halves, basically, and one half is like our efficiency brain, while on the other half is we have the creativity brain. So looking at the efficiency, this is whenever we are asked to like, be more productive, be more efficient about these things, it's like it's activating the control network up here for every individual of us. That means we're focused, we're rigid, and we're trying to work rule-based, while on the other hand, creativity itself is the default mode network. So this is sort of like the standby, what you're usually in. When not tasked, under stress, or any other circumstances. That means you're like free-flowing, you're associate, and you're playful. So here comes the bad news. You can only activate one of the 2. Like your brain is not a bi-turbo, like you can find it in some crazy supercars. It can only do the one thing or the other thing, or to some extent one thing while it's doing the other thing, which means like you need to understand which of your brain halves do I have to activate and what is basically the costs for it that I'm working on this side now, what I might not be doing on the other half. And also maybe the problem with the times that we're facing in right now, and I think we can also draw a line here to politics and all the movements that we're seeing in Europe, all over the world better said, is that like there's studies, and it's called the terror management theory. A very interesting thing, a psychological study is that found out, and I think it makes a lot of sense, I think probably for your own sort of like reflection of the world right now, is that when people are faced with uncertainty, they cling to familiar structures. So it's not only that a company is calling for efficiency, might trigger that part of the brain, it's just the general surrounding that we're living in. So the more uncertain it becomes, the more we try to hang on to something that we're aware of, that we know that sort of gives us like security and it gives us comfort. And that at the same time means that we're more and more activating the part of the brain that is not actively thinking about tomorrow. And on the other hand, and we've seen it this morning in 3 different keynotes about OKRs, and we're trying to track things, and we do want to understand the progress, and ideally we want to understand where things going to land, even though before we're starting to execute, right? That is the second thing that is very important to understand, like systems that are optimized for predictability, they reject ambiguity. And ambiguity is the lifeblood of creativity. So at the same time, that means the more you're actually trying to predict a future, which is impossible, because the times that we're living in, there's only futures. There's several futures, and the question will be is which is the one that is most likely to occur, or what can we actually do to create this future, is you're basically taking away your own ability and your own skill set to actually design it by trying to control what you currently have. So, and I think that is the trap that is very important to understand and very important to see, and where I would like to encourage you and invite you not to run into. And then we have politics, and we have a new chancellor, and this guy tells us that the Unwort of the year is work-life balance. And then in this country, people need to work more, we need to get back to it, like work needs to be a priority, and this is the way how we can get out of all of this. And then maybe another question for you is, do you really think that's our problem? This is really what it is? Because if you look at a broader economical and political scale, and if we're looking at the European Union, you will find out that nobody at the European Union is talking about an efficiency crisis. We're talking about productivity crisis in Europe. This is what we're talking about. Or putting it in definition is, the problem that we're facing right now in Europe is that we are no longer achieving more with less. So, and that is a true competitive disadvantage. Because if you look into Draghi's report, I think he had released this 2 years ago by now, on the European competitiveness and what we need to do. It's a 120 pages paper. Throw it into ChatGPT, and then you will probably have the most important insights within 5 minutes. But apart from that, what you can see and what is really interesting, what he refers to is that the productivity growth per worker in the last 5 years has improved by 0.6% in the European Union, while in the same time, it has improved by 1.6% in the United States. This is more than double. And that is a crazy number, what we are actually looking at and to understand it. And then even think about the last 5 years, all the technological advancements and improvements, I'm going to talk about it in a minute, is like, we have it all at the same hands. We all have the same access to it. How can it be that those guys are so much more productive than we actually are? Considering usually we kind of like, if you want to tap into cliches, we might consider them a little bit more lazy. And we feel like we're very efficient as like German workers and all stuff. So I find it's very interesting numbers. And coming out of it is another very interesting thing that he's pointing out is that like actually 72% of the 2023 GDP gap was due to productivity differences. It was not because we have been a lot more inefficient than the US guys are working. Maybe we are, but as a matter of fact, the productivity is the thing that we're just creating less in the same time. And if you look at the numbers, it's 15.8 trillion in the EU versus 26.8 trillion in the US, and 72% of that is due to productivity. It's a vast amount of money that we're actually not leveraging in the European Union. And one of the explanations that Draghi has to it is that while Europe has optimized the mature sectors, maybe speaking about the diesel engine in the automotive industry, I think very good example, the US has leaned into high growth areas, technology. Basically, we all know the stories from the Silicon Valley, but also right now is that you imagine that they are the top tier in AI, right now. There's nowhere in the world made bigger investments into that sector than in the United States right now. And I find this very interesting from a perspective to what do we actually have to look at when we're talking about tough times, where we need to streamline ourselves and become better at what we do. So, under the line, I think what those numbers said, very important, you can't optimize your way into your future that you have not built yet. And that is basically leading to the question is like, what's actually coming first, right? And to the better question, like, at what do we want to be efficient? Like, what is it really? And then it leads to two other questions. And we've also seen it on the work cloud is like, of course, the question, how can we do this cheaper, is probably very familiar. When management, the top management looks at the numbers, they see like budget cuts and they're trying to understand is like, but can I still create the output? Or maybe the expectation is still create the same output, but with less budget. Is like, how can we do this cheaper? I would like to invite you, and I think we talked about it at dinner last night at all, don't think about that question. Ask yourself the question, what's worth doing at all? Because my hypothesis is that we're now in an area with all the opportunities and all of the things that we've done in the past that maybe some of the things that we are doing, they're just not worth doing. Because if you have a very close look at it, you will maybe find out that they don't impact your business or doesn't help you. So instead of asking, how can we do the things cheaper that we're already doing, is like, ask yourself the question, what's worth doing at all? So coming back to the three words that I've introduced earlier to you, what does that mean? So innovation decides what's worth doing. Productivity scales it. And then there's efficiency, because efficiency makes it sustainable in the long run. And don't confuse sustainability with like ecological aspects. There's also economical sustainability, there's social sustainability. So there's different levels of sustainability that I'm referring to when I'm talking about this. And that leads to you as a marketing team. And what I would like to invite you to and understand is like that when you go out of this day, when you go back to work tomorrow, start being a free mode marketing team. Because the answer is, I'm not advocating for productivity instead of efficiency. I'm not advocating for innovation instead of productivity. I'm advocating for you need to do all the three things. And you need to understand when you do them, at what time, for the right thing. So that means efficiency usually has the ultimate goal of reducing waste. It's coming back to the brain. It's a very linear mindset, what you've seen, what happens here on the right side of your brain. And you will probably have metrics like cost, time saved that you could achieve, which are valuable outcomes. But maybe the project and the task that you're working on is calling for productivity, which is about like maximizing the leverage of what you're doing, which is a strategic mindset. And the question is like, how can we scale? And the metric will always be output to input to go after and to look at. As to while innovation is something where your ultimate goal will be inventing the future by exploring new value. And to explore new value, you can't go linear, you can't go strategic, or maybe partly strategic, to put it into place. But what you have to go is like, you have to be experimental. Because remember, there's not one future, there's only futures. And the only way to find this out these days, as volatile and uncertain they are, is to dig into experiments, learn things, go ahead, and go from growth there. So your ultimate metric in an innovational mindset will always be learnings. Okay, so how do I put this into practice? How do I put this into action? David and Priska also asked me to bring some actual case study from work that we're doing to give you a little bit more context how to do that. So I brought a case study from the communication industry, Deutsche Telekom, probably familiar to all of you, not so far from here. Let's talk about call center. It's probably a fucked up job. I don't know why people do that. But anyways, call centers, of course, they're important. They drive business. At the same time, they're cost centers. They're expensive, right? So always like a thing when I think call center, and we could probably do another word cloud, and you would probably also tell me best case scenario to think about efficiency, right? So, well, when we started the project or approached it 2 years ago, there was an insight that we worked on, which is a study that found out that 40% of EU consumers, they prefer self-service over interacting with human representatives. You could also say this is really sad that people do not want to talk to each other anymore. I guess it's the reality that we kind of have to face and have to look at, and I think it plays into the whole thing about generative AI, next level chatbots. So how do you approach this insight? If I approach it from an efficiency standpoint, I would say, cut the waste, scale the routine. If I approach it from a productivity standpoint, I would say, free up the humans from their shitty job and focus on what matters. And if I approach it from an innovational standpoint, I would say, reimagine the experience and build for customer expectation. So that's where we started. Like, we jumped into it. Remember 2 years ago, which is hard to believe, there was no ChatGPT at that point. It just turned 2 years old, and just think about it, how much it has changed since then. So we were still working on some sort of like more or less intelligent, hashtag crappy, agent call bot services so far and so forth. So we tried to understand value, where we could actually create it when people demand self-service. The telecom at that point already, they had a WhatsApp chatbot that you could reach out to. The bot would basically refer you to an actual call agent, and the call agent would not call to you with you, but they would actually text with you back and forth, right? And the first thing, so we had infrastructure in place. The first thing that we did is we built a little bot for this WhatsApp conversation, which would be triggered after the call center agent ended the conversation. It could be anything. Hi, my internet is broken at home. Hey, my phone contract is 3 years old. I think I could upgrade to a new one. It could be any kind of interaction. And after that interaction happened, the chatbot basically took over, fully automated, and just asked the question like, can I maybe look if I have like some upgrades for the current contracts that you have with us? And we only had one upgrade. So whenever people would say, oh yeah, I'm interested maybe in upgrading my internet speed at home, this would be the case that we had built for the chatbot. So we brought that into it. The chatbot would then check if there's an upgrade available, and you could do like a fully non-human automated booking. That is the first thing that we did. And what we found out within a time frame of 6 weeks is like we had more than 10% conversion. Like somebody going into the WhatsApp chatbot complaining about a shitty internet at home left with an upgrade for a faster internet out of this conversation. Interesting, right? Maybe if you would have asked me before, I would have not told you that I'm very sure that this is going to be the outcome, right? But it worked. So that was the innovational mindset. And then from there we went and said like, okay, if this is working, if we have the technology in place, let's scale it. Like, let's bring it to more touch points, because the telecom at that time, they already had Frag Magenta, which is like their version of a chatbot working on their web, working in app, working on voice. So we brought the exact same thing into Frag Magenta conversations and measured it again. And what we found out is that we had 4 times more interactions, and we still had a conversion rate more than 4%, which was like a true indicator. We understood the value in the first experiment, being able to be more productive in the second experiment, because we did not invest more time, we did not invest more cost, we just triggered more interaction and we sold more upgrades. And looking at that, of course, then it was very interesting to see like, how can we make it efficient? So we went to the scaling of the offering and started to integrate more and more offerings into the self-service. Meaning, for example, you were also able then in the next step to upgrade your home contract to Magenta TV and watch TV via telecom at home. And we run this whole thing again. And what we could actually see is that within a time frame of just half a year, we actually created more than 1 million euros in new revenue. We did not shift conversations from here to there, but it were actually new conversations. The 40% of VE consumers that beforehand were not really willed or not really interested being called up by a call center agent or call themselves to do that. But they actually did it because we gave them an alternative option. And this is what I mean when I say about these free mode things. Try to understand where you're at in your project. Try to understand what you want to find out. We want to learn, is there even value in it, before we think about how we can cut costs in the agency center, right? Once we proved that, we were trying to understand, but is that a singular case? Or can we actually scale it, bring it to more touch points, serve more people at the same time? Then to ultimately go ahead and think about like, how can we actually optimize our sales with the entire portfolio now that we're actually shifting and offering more and more within that self-service chat process. So, last thing that I want to share with you today. one more word about productivity. I don't want to speak too much about innovation today because that could carry on for hours and hours and hours. So I would like to leave it with productivity and the question of like, has ever somebody heard about the productivity paradox? No one? No problem. The productivity paradox is really interesting. We can see it for more than 30 years now. Basically, ever since humans have tried to digitalize the world of working, we're talking about the productivity paradox. And there's a really cool sort of like quote. I don't remember the guy's name, but he said it in '87. He said like technological advancements has pretty much touched on every aspect in business life, but productivity. It didn't touch it. So when they looked at studies in the US in the early 90s, when the first wave came, they found out like productivity didn't went up just because all of the companies actually started to using technology. It remained the same. Early in the late 90s, early 2000s, when more and more companies did it, when technology was refined, it was more accessible, more easy to use, and cheaper to actually purchase and integrate, we could see a productivity spike. Only then to go down again, because in the 2010s, when there was the last big technology shift, when mobile was introduced to us, when cloud computing was introduced to us, the same thing. There was a lot of expectation around this technology. In terms of like productivity, it didn't play out for the first couple of years. I mean, if you look at Europe right now, if you look at Germany, only around about 20% of German companies run on the cloud. 20 years later, which is insane, right? But that's the reality. And so we're now going into the next platform shift, speaking about artificial intelligence. And I think everybody assumes that it makes us more productive, more efficient. And regarding to the productivity paradox, the question really is, will it do it? And when will it actually do it, right? So just looking at yourself, thinking about all the tools that you have started to use, that maybe have been put onto you and people ask you to use them for compliance or any other reasons. Like, think about it. Did they actually make your work more valuable? Or did they make your work just more trackable? So going to Gen AI, and I think we've briefly touched on it today also as well, I think the thing that I would like to leave with you today, what is very important is like approaching this technology without a mindset of strategic productivity. Even AI becomes just another busy trap that maybe makes you more trackable, but most likely not more productive. So take this away, think about the three modes of innovation, of productivity, and of efficiency, and think about the way you're working, because if you don't evolve how you work, tools just gonna make the noise louder. Thank you very much.